So this is Laura Brawley with Nanny Biz Reviews, and we are here with Kathy Webb, who has generously given us her time and talent today to answer all the nanny tax questions we have out there, and we have a whole lot of them. So Kathy, I am literally just going to run through this huge list of questions, but before that, I wanted to see if you would give us just a brief introduction to you and your company, and also any kind of disclaimers you might have, because that's always a part of these kind of tax and legal webinars.
Okay, fantastic, Laura. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to share this information with everybody. HomeWork Solutions, which is the company that I work for, I'm one of the founders and owners, has been providing payroll and payroll tax services to families nationwide since 1993. So we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. There are probably still a few questions that I haven't heard and come up with an answer to. But I have to say, in the last 20 years, I've probably heard most of them and worked with both families and their employees to get beyond the questions and get them settled. I also want to make sure everyone who's listening today understands that this information that I'm sharing today is information of a general nature. It's not specific tax or legal advice for your listeners' individual situations. Individuals who want specific tax or specific legal advice for their specific circumstances are advised to consult with a qualified tax or legal professional. Where possible, I'm going to give references to IRS publications that can go into much more detail than we can here that might be able to help the listeners out in the future. So thanks
Perfect.
for having me, and we can just get started, I imagine.
Okay. Well, excuse me, the first general category is classification. The big question of, is she an employee, that's what it should say, or independent contractor? I just caught that mistake. So the first question is, are nannies considered employees or independent contractors, and does it matter how much she earns or how often she works for the family?
Okay, so this one's very easy. Nannies are employees. I'll just repeat that. Nannies are employees. It doesn't matter if an employer wants to call their nanny an independent contractor, and it doesn't matter if the nanny wants to be called an independent contractor. The distinction between employees and contractors is written in law, so it's not a matter of individual decision, and it hinges on control. The family has the right to control when you work, how you perform the job, and they provide you the place and the tools for the job. It doesn't matter if they give you a lot of latitude, they still have the right to control, and that's the central definition of an employee-employer relationship.
So just to clarify, because we got these as questions, if a nanny's working a full-time job during the week and she's just babysitting for a whole bunch of different families on the weekends, she's an employee, correct?
That's correct. Now,
okay.
Whether or not she's an employee doesn't directly have a one-to-one correlation on tax responsibilities. So the relationship with the weekend families will determine whether or not whether there's an employee or contractor relationship. If the nanny retains control, she sets the pay rate, she says yes or no to the schedule. If she can arrange for others to perform the work for her instead of her showing up in person, then she's in likelihood an independent contractor. However, that's pretty rare. However, if family A says, I need you here every Saturday from 6 p.m. to midnight, and they give you the food to feed the children, they give you some schedules, some rules, they have control. And again, control is the central determining factor. In my experience, it is very, very hard for a family to argue that they don't have the right of control for child care being provided to their children in their private residence. That's really what it boils down to.
Okay, so if you have a nanny who makes a living doing babysitting and temp jobs, she doesn't have any full-time nanny jobs, she's just temp, is she an employee or an independent contractor?
Okay, whether a job is full-time, part-time, or temporary, it doesn't matter at all when making the determination of employee versus contractor. Control is a central matter. It's very hard for a nanny or the parents to make the case that the family does not have the right of control. what and when to feed the children, approved and disapproved activities, schedule, the like. In the vast majority of circumstances, an employer-employee relationship exists, whether you call yourself a babysitter or a temp nanny, whatever. However, there are certain specialties, especially newborn care and doula services, that are easier to define as a contractor relationship. After all, these care specialists are engaged to interact with the family in a very different way than a temp nanny interacts with a family. The NCS or doula typically will set the rate of compensation, may engage other individuals to provide services, and exercises considerable control over the scope and the nature of the provided services. They may say, I don't do laundry, I will work these particular hours, I will perform these specific services, I'm not going to cook for you, I am going to cook for you, whatever it is. But the NCS and doula, one can make a case that they are independent contractors if they so desire, but typical temp nanny and babysitting jobs, not likely.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for making that clarification. So what about the nannies who work for agencies? There's a lot of agencies who provide emergency and backup care sitting. Are those nannies independent contractors or are they employees?
The nannies are employees. It's a question of who the employer is. If the agency pays the nanny, then the nanny is an employee of the agency. If the family pays the nanny directly and then pays the agency a finder's fee or an hourly or daily fee for arranging the schedule or the booking, but again, the family paid the nanny, then the family is the employer.
Okay, great. And what's the difference between a W-2 and a 1099? Because a lot of families will just refer to 1099s.
Right. Okay. A W-2 is a wage and tax statement, and it's a form that's provided by employers to employees at the end of every calendar year. It summarizes the wages paid and the taxes withheld from the wages. A nanny who receives a W-2 knows that the family is paying the family's portion of the Social Security and Medicare taxes, as well as unemployment taxes and workers' compensation insurance where required. A 1099 MISC, which is what they're referring to when they're saying a 1099, it's a 1099 miscellaneous, is typically used by a business or family to document fees paid to an independent contractor. This independent contractor is responsible for self-employment tax, essentially the employer and employee portions of Social Security and Medicare. When the nanny employer provides the nanny a 1099 form, they're pushing their tax obligations over to the nanny. Not only is it not proper, but the IRS is cracking down on all businesses, including families, who issue 1099 forms, looking closely at the relationship between the parties, the family and the nannies in this circumstance, and prosecuting the businesses and families who should have been issuing a W-2 form to the worker. It's an enforcement priority with the Obama administration, and there are 22 states that are working hand in hand with the IRS to do these examinations of the 1099 forms. The states are interested because unemployment funds are severely depleted. The recession's been horrible on the state budgets. And the families who issue a 1099 are not paying their fair share of unemployment taxes. In fact, it was just in the news several times within the last 3 or 4 weeks that the Internal Revenue Service has made it a point to let the public know that the Voluntary Worker Reclassification Program, which is a program by the Internal Revenue Service to let families that have been improperly using a 1099 form sort of get a get-out-of-jail-free card if they raise their hand and say, I've been doing it wrong in the past, but I promise to do it right in the future. They pay a minor fine. It's like 1% of what the taxes should have been. And then going forward, they treat the worker with a W-2 form. The IRS has gone out of their way to make it very clear to the public that this voluntary settlement program applies to families with nanny tax obligations. So if you don't take advantage, if the families don't take advantage of this opportunity now, the odds are pretty high that enforcement is going to pick up. In the past, when the IRS has had these voluntary programs, raise your hand, pay a fine, and on all as well, they have followed up these voluntary programs with much stricter enforcement. So it's coming. They've already played their hand there.
So this is the time to get on board.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've spoken to numerous reporters here over the last 4 weeks, and it's pretty well known in the accounting community at this point in time that this is something that should be taken care of.
Well, good. I hope everybody, this is great information for nannies to take back to their employers. Okay.
Do you want help talking to your employers about taxes? Then check out the new on-demand webinar, How to Talk to Your Employers About Taxes. Just head over to nannybizreviews.com, click on Nanny Resources, it's in the brown navigation bar, and then click on Nanny Training and you'll see the webinar there. Also, HomeWork Solutions is offering parents referred by Nanny Biz Reviews a free gift valued at $100. You can get all the details on that page too.